I'm Brittany. This is Merlin, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch and read gay things. We are continuing to read King's Rising. That is book 3 in the Captive Prince trilogy. We are on page 179 for chapter 11. We read for a couple of hours. We take a break around halfway through. Please no spoilers in the chat because there are always new readers here. I am not a new reader for the first time on this channel. We're reading something that I've actually read before. So I know what happens by and large, but plenty of people in the chat do not. So please, any rereaders, as we've taken to calling them, please be conscientious of new readers. There are trigger warnings in the description box on this stream for the series. Please avail yourself of those should you need them. And what else can be said before we start reading for today? Because Jacost has entered the chat, so to speak. We now have to deal with her, or really, more to the point, Damon now has to deal with her. So we're gonna jump in. You know, what could possibly go wrong? He found himself in the women's solar, with its light, airy fittings and the reclining couch, carved with a simple design, now standing empty. The window had a view of the approach all the way to the first tower. She would have watched his army arrive from here, cresting the far hill and drawing nearer, watched every step of its progress to the fort. She would have watched her own people depart, taking food in wagons and soldiers, fleeing until the road was empty, until stillness descended, until the second army appeared, far enough away to be silent, but drawing closer. Nicandros came to stand beside him. Jacost is confined in a cell in the east wing. Do you have further orders? Strip her and send her to Vare as a slave? Damon didn't move from the sill. Nicandros said, "You don't really want that." "No," he said. "I want it to be worse." He said it with his eyes on the horizon. He knew he would not allow her to be treated with anything less than respect. He remembered her picking her way across cool marble towards him in the slave baths. He could see her hand in the attacks on the village, in the framing of Macedon. No one is to speak with her. No one is to enter her cell. Give her every comfort, but do not let her get a hold on any of the men. He was not a fool anymore. He knew her abilities. Put your best soldiers on her door, your most loyal, and choose them from among those who have no taste for women. I'll post Pallas and Lydos. Nicandros nodded, and departed to do his bidding. Familiar with war, Damon knew what came next, but still felt a grim satisfaction when the first of his alerts from the watchtowers began to sound, the entire warning system flaring to life. Horns in the inner towers sounding, but his men shouting orders, taking up positions on the battlements, streaming out to man the gates. Right on schedule. Menaidos had fled. Damon had control of both this fort and of a powerful political prisoner in Jacost, and he and his armies were on their way south. The regent's heralds had come to Carthus. He knew what Varetian eyes saw when they looked at him, a barbarian in savage splendor. He did nothing to lessen the impression. He sat on the throne in armor, his thighs and arms heavy with bared muscle. He watched the regent's herald enter the hall. Luron sat beside him on an identical twin throne. Damon let the regent's herald see them, royalty flanked by Achaelan soldiers in warlike armor made for killing. He let him take in this bare stone hall of a provincial fort, bristling with the spears of soldiers, where the Achaelan prince-killer sat beside the Varetian prince on the dais, dressed in the same crude leather as his soldiers. He let him see Luron, too, let him see the picture they presented, royalty united. Luron was the only Varetian in the hall filled with Achaelans. Damon liked it. He liked having Luron beside him, liked letting the regent's herald see that Luron had Achaelos alongside him, had Damianos of Achaelos, now in his favored arena of war. The regent's herald was accompanied by a party of 6, 4 ceremonial guards and 2 Varetian dignitaries. Walking through a hall of armed Achaelans had them nervous, though they approached the thrones insolently, without bending a knee, the herald coming to a halt at the steps of the dais and arrogantly meeting Damon's eyes. Damon settled his full weight into the throne, sprawled on it comfortably, and watched all of this happen. In Eos, his father's soldiers would have taken the herald by the arm and forced him down, forehead to the floor, with a foot atop his head. He slightly lifted his fingers. The imperceptible gesture halted his men from doing the same now. Last time, Damon vividly recalled, the regent's herald had been received in a flurry in a courtyard. Luron white-faced, pounding in on horseback, wheeling his mount to face his uncle's herald down. He remembered the herald's arrogance, his words, and the Hessian sack pinned to his saddle. It was the same herald. Damon recognized his darker hair and complexion, his thickened eyebrows, and the embroidered pattern on his laced Varetian jacket. His party of 4 guards and 2 officials came to a halt behind him. "We accept the regent's surrender at Charcy," said Damon. The herald flushed. "The king of Vare sends a message." "The king of Vare is seated beside us," said Damon. "We do not recognize his uncle's false claim to the throne." The herald was forced to pretend that those words had not been spoken. He turned from Damon to Luron. "Luron of Vare, Your uncle extends his friendship to you in good faith. He offers you a chance to restore your good name." "No head in a bag," said Luron. Luron's voice was mild. Relaxed on the throne, one leg extended out in front of himself, a wrist draped elegantly on the wooden arm, the shift in power was evident. He was no longer the rogue nephew fighting alone on the border. He was a significant, newly established power with lands and an army of his own. "Your uncle is a good man. The council has called for your death, but your uncle will not hear them. He will not accept the rumors that you have turned on your own people. He wants to give you the chance to prove yourself." "Prove myself," said Luron. "A fair trial. Come to Eos, stand before the council and plead your case, and if you are found innocent, all that is yours will be returned to you." "All that is mine," Luron repeated the herald's words for the second time. "Your Highness," said one of the dignitaries, and Damon was startled to recognize Etienne, a minor aristocrat from Luron's faction. Etienne had the good manners to sweep off his hat. "Your uncle has been fair to all those who count themselves your supporters. He simply wants to welcome you back. I can assure you that this trial is only a formality to appease the council." Etienne spoke with his hat held earnestly in his hands. "Even if there have been some minor indiscretions, you only need to show repentance and he will open his heart. He knows, just as your supporters know, that what they are saying about you in Eos cannot be true. You are no traitor to Ver." Luron only regarded Etienne for a moment before he turned his attention back to the herald. "All that is mine will be returned to me." Were those his words? Tell me his exact words. "If you come to Eos and stand trial," said the herald, "all that is yours will be returned to you." "And if I refuse?" "If you refuse, you will be executed," said the herald. "Your death will be a public traitor's death, your body displayed on the city gates for all to see. What is left will receive no burial. You will not be entombed with your father and brother. Your name will be struck from the family register. Ver will not remember you, and all that is yours will be cast asunder. That is the king's promise and my message." Luron said nothing. An uncharacteristic silence, and Damon saw the subtle signs, the tension across his shoulders, the muscles sliding in his jaw. Damon turned the full weight of his gaze on the herald. "Ride back to the regent," said Damon, "and tell him this. All that is rightfully Luron's will return to him when he is king. His uncle's false promises do not tempt us. We are the kings of Achielos and Ver. We will keep our state and come to him in Eos when we ride in at the head of armies. He faces Ver and Achielos united, and he will fall to our might." "Your Highness," said Etienne, his grip on the hat now anxious, "please, you can't side with this Achielan, not after everything that's said about him, everything he's done. The crimes he's accused of in Eos are worse than your own." "And what is it I am accused of?" said Damon with utter scorn. It was the herald who answered in clear Achielan and a voice that carried to every corner of the hall. "You are a patricide. You killed your own father, King Theomedes of Achielos." As the hall dissolved into chaos, Achielan voices shouting in fury, onlookers leaping up from their stools, Damon looked at the herald and said in a low voice, "Get him out of my sight." I feel like Damon. I have never felt more like Damon in my life, because it's like with every new fucking infuriating turn of bullshit that the regent pulls, it always feels like, oh yeah, Duh, but then you didn't see it coming, so you feel stupid. But of course! Needless to say, I did not remember that. Of course, of course, of course, of course, of course. Every playing piece on the chessboard has been accounted for and used to maximum infuriating detriment. That was a scene break, by the way. Actually, one second. In this new setup, let me check and make sure that everything looks okay. Yeah. Which, by the way, also, I'm having to rely on my old eyeliner for a second while I get in new stuff. And that isn't to say if I start looking like a raccoon in a hurricane, that's why. This is crappier eyeliner than I would like to be using right now. So just so we all know. All right. He thrust up from his throne and went to one of the windows. It was too small and thick glass to see anything more than a blurry view of the courtyard. Behind him, the hall had cleared on his order. He tried to control his breathing. The shouts of the Achielans in the hall had been shouts of furious outrage. He told himself that no one could think for a moment that he would. His head was pounding. He felt a furious powerlessness at it, that Castor could kill their father and then lie like this, poison the very truth, and get away with. The injustice of it took him in the throat. He felt it like the final tearing of that relationship, as though somehow before this moment there had been some hope that he could reach Castor, but that now what was between them was unsalvageable. Worse than making him a prisoner, worse than making him a slave, Castor had made him into his father's killer. He felt the regent's smiling influence, his mild, reasonable voice. He thought of the regent's lies spreading, taking hold, the people of Eos believing him a murderer, his father's death dishonored and used against him. To have his people mistrust him, to have his friends turn from him, to have the thing that had been most dear and good in his life twisted into a weapon to hurt. He turned. Luron was standing alone against the backdrop of the hall. With sudden double vision, Damon saw Luron as he was, his true isolation. The regent had done this to Luron, had whittled away his support, had turned his people against him. He remembered trying to convince Luron of the regent's benevolence in Arles, as naive as Etienne. Luron had had a lifetime of this. He said in a steady, measured voice, "He thinks he can provoke me. He can't. I am not going to act in anger or in haste. I am going to take back the provinces of Achielos one by one, and when I march into Eos, I will make him pay for what he has done." Luron just kept watching him with that slightly assessing expression on his face. "You can't be considering his offer," said Damon. Luron didn't answer immediately. Damon said, "You can't go to Eos. Luron, you won't get a trial. He'll kill you." "I'd get a trial," said Luron. "It's what he wants. He wants me proven unfit. He wants the council to ratify him as king so that he can rule with his claim wholly legitimized. But I'd get a trial." Luron's voice was quite steady. "He'd have a parade of witnesses, and each one would swear me a traitor. Luron, the debauched shirker who sold his country to Achielos and spread his legs for the Achielan prince-killer. And when I had no reputation left, I'd be taken to the public square and killed in front of a crowd. I'm not considering his offer." Looking at him across the gap that separated them, Damon realized for the first time that a trial might have some kind of seductive appeal to Luron, who must wish, somewhere deep inside himself, to clear his name. But Luron was right. Any trial would be a death sentence, a performance designed to humiliate him, and then end him, overseen by the regent's terrifying command of public spectacle. Then what? There's something else, said Luron. What do you mean? I mean that my uncle doesn't hold out a hand for someone to knock it aside. He sent that herald to us for a reason. There's something else. Luron's next words were almost unwilling. There's always something else. There was a sound from the doorway. Damon turned to see Pallas in full uniform. It's the Lady Jacost, said Pallas. She's asking to see you. Do I remember the details? No. Am I kind of glad about that right now? Yes. That was a scene break, by the way. The whole time that his father was dying, she and Castor had been pursuing their affair. That was all he could think as he stared at Pallas, his pulse still beating hard from the accusation, from Castor's treachery. His father growing weaker with every breath. He had never talked of it with her. He had never been able to bear talking of it with anyone. But sometimes he had come from his father's sickbed to see her, to take solace, wordlessly, in her body. He knew that he was not in control of himself. He wanted to go and rip the truth out of her with his bare hands. What did you do? What did you and Castor plan? He knew that he was vulnerable to her in this state, that her expertise, like Luron's, was in finding weakness and pressing down. He looked over at Luron and said, flatly, deal with it. Luron gazed at him for a long moment, as if searching for something in his expression. Then he nodded wordlessly and made his way to the cells. 5 minutes passed. 10. He swore and pushed away from the window, and did the one thing that he knew better than to do. He left the hall and descended the worn stone steps to the prison cells. At the grating on the final door, he heard a voice from the other side, and stopped. The cells at Carthus were dank, cramped, and underground, as though Menaidos of Sicyon had never anticipated having political prisoners, which was probably the case. Damon felt the temperature drop. It was cooler here, in the hewn stone under the fort. He passed through the first door, the guards coming to attention, and moved into a corridor with uneven stone flooring. The second door had a section of tight grating through which he could glimpse the interior of the cell. He could see her, reclined on an exquisitely carved seat. Her cell was clean and well furnished, with tapestries and cushions that had been transferred from her solar on Damon's orders. Luron was standing in front of her. Damon stopped, unseen in the shadowed space behind the door grating. Seeing the two of them together made something turn over in his stomach. He heard a cool, familiar voice speak. I must say that once again, the god of manifestation has descended to be among us. Henry, at the very end of the book chat that we were having on the previous 3 chapters of King's Rising, just before this stream started, said at the very end, as we were talking about Jacost, he was like, I need Jacost and Luron to talk to each other. And I remember the first time I read this trilogy, and Jacost dropped in, I had the exact same overwhelming desire. But once again, Henry said something, and I had to internalize knowing that he would get it. God damn. Made even worse now, having to internalize, because he's manifested so much else at this point. Had to swallow a nuclear bomb earlier. Everybody sit the fuck down. He's not coming, said Luron. She looked like a queen. Her hair was twisted up and held in place by a single pearl pin, a gold crown of polished curls atop her long, balanced neck. She sat on the low reclining seat, something in her posture reminiscent of his father, King Theomedes, on his throne. The simple white sheath of her gown, gathered at each shoulder, was covered by an embroidered silk shawl of royal vermilion, which someone had allowed her to retain. Under her arched golden brows, her eyes were the color of woad. The extent to which she and Luron resembled each other in coloring, in their cool intellectual lack of emotion, in the detachment with which they regarded one another, was both unnerving and extraordinary. She spoke in pure, accentless Varetian. Damianos has sent me his bedboy. Blonde, blue-eyed, and all laced up like a Virgo intacta. You're just his type. Luron said, You know who I am. The Prince du Jour, said Jacost. There was a pause. Damon needed to step forward, announce his presence, and stop this. He watched Luron arrange himself against the wall. Luron said, If you're asking did I fuck him, the answer is yes. I think we both know you weren't the one fucking him. You were on your back with your legs in the air. He hasn't changed that much. Jacost's voice was as refined as her poise, as if the practice of high manners was not disturbed by either Luron's words or her own. Jacost said, The question is how much you liked it. Damon found himself with his hand on the wood beside the grate, listening as intently as he could for Luron's reply. He shifted position, trying to get a glimpse of Luron's face. I see. We are going to trade stories. Shall I tell you my preferred position? I imagine it's similar to mine. Confined, said Luron. It was her turn to pause. She used the time to peruse his features, as if sampling the quality of silk. Both she and Luron looked utterly at ease. It was Damon whose heart was pounding. She said, Are you asking what it was like? Damon didn't move, didn't breathe. He knew Jacost, knew the danger. He felt fixed to the spot as Jacost continued her study of Luron's face. Luron Vert. They say you're frigid. They say you rebuff all your suitors, that no man has been good enough to prise your legs apart. I believe you thought it would be brutish and physical, and maybe a part of you even wanted it that way. But you and I both know that Damon does not make love like that. He took you slowly. He kissed you until you started to want it. Luron said, Don't stop on my account. You let him undress you. You let him put his hands on you. They say you hate Achielans, but you let one into your bed. You weren't expecting what it felt like when he touched you. You weren't expecting the weight of his body, how it felt to have his attention, to have him want you. You left out the part near the end when it was so good I let myself forget what he'd done. Oh dear, said Jacost. That was the truth. God! Another pause as I hit the mic. It's heady, isn't it? Said Jacost. He was born to be a king. He's not a stand-in or a second choice like you are. He rules men just by breathing. When he walks into a room, he commands it. People love him, like they loved your brother. My dead brother, said Luron helpfully. Shall we now do the part where I spread for my brother's killer? You can describe it again. He couldn't see Luron's face as he said it, though Luron's voice was easy, as was his elegant lean against the stone wall of the cell. She said, Is it difficult to ride with a man who is more of a king than you are? I wouldn't let Castor hear you call him a king. Or is that what you like about it? That Damon is what you'll never be? That he has surety, self-belief, strength of conviction. Those are things that you yearn for. When he focuses it all on you, it makes you feel like you can do anything. Luron said, now we are both telling the truth. The quality of this pause was different. Jacost gazed back at Luron. Menaidos is not going to defect from Castor to Damianos, said Jacost. Why not? Said Luron. Because when Menaidos fled Carthus, I encouraged him to head straight to Castor, who will kill him for leaving me alone here. Damon felt himself turn cold. Jacost said, we now have dispensed with pleasantries. I'm in possession of certain information. You will offer my clemency in exchange for what I know. There will be a series of negotiations then. When we have decided on a mutually beneficial arrangement, I will return to Castor and Eos. After all, said Jacost, that is why Damianos sent you here. Luron seemed to study her in turn. When he spoke, it was without particular urgency. No. He sent me to tell you that you're not important. You'll be held here until he's crowned in Eos, then you will be executed for treason. He's never going to see you again. Luron pushed himself off the wall. But thank you, said Luron, for the information about Menaidos. That was helpful. He had almost reached the door before she spoke. You haven't asked me about my son. Luron stopped, then turned. Enthroned on the reclining couch, she was regal, like a queen in a sculpted marble frieze, commanding the length of a room. He came early. It was a long birth, through the night into the morning. At the end of it all, a child. I was looking into his eyes when we got word of Damon's soldiers marching on the fort. I had to send him away for safety. It's a terrible thing to separate a mother from her child. Really? Is this all? Said Luron. A few pinpricks and the desperate appeal of motherhood. I thought you were an opponent. Do you really think a Prince of Vere would be moved by the fate of a bastard's child? You should be, said Jacost. He is the son of a king. The son of a king. Damon felt dizzy, as if the floor was scrolling out from under his feet. She delivered the words calmly, as she had delivered every remark, except that these words changed everything. The idea that it might be, that it was his child. Everything resolved into a pattern, that the child had come so early, that she had traveled so far into the north to deliver it, to a place where the date of the child's birth could be obscured, that in Eos she had heavily disguised the first months of the pregnancy, both from himself and from Castor. All of Luron's features whitened in reeling shock, and he stared at Jacost as though he had been struck. Even through his own shock, Luron's sheer horror was excessive. Damon didn't understand it, didn't understand the look in Luron's eyes or in Jacost's. Then Luron spoke in an awful voice. You have sent Damianos' son to my uncle. She said, You see, I am an opponent. I will not be left in a cell to rot. You will tell Damon that I will see him as I require, and I think you will find that he will not send in a bed boy this time. It's the end of the chapter. Forgot a couple of things that are going on right now. Can't really talk about it yet, though. We'll get there. We're on page 195 for chapter 12. Liv out here manifesting the worst shit. While Henry is out here manifesting the gayest. Liv, honey. Did I say we're on page 195 for chapter 12? Jesus, I can't remember anything anymore. It was strange that all he could think about was his father. He sat on the edge of the bed in his rooms, with his elbows on his knees and the heels of his palms digging hard into his eyes. The last thing that he had been truly aware of was Luron turning and seeing him through the grating. Oh! The way this chapter buries the lead. He had taken one step back from Luron, then another. Then he had turned and pushed his way up the stairs to his quarters, a hazy journey. No one had bothered him since. He needed the silence and the solitude, the time alone to think, but he couldn't reason. The pounding in his head was too strong, the emotions in his chest in a tangle. He might have a son, and all he could think about was his father. It was as if some protective membrane had been torn away and everything that he had not let himself feel was exposed behind the rupture. He had nothing left to hold it back, only this raw, terrible feeling of being denied family. One second. Ouch! God! Ow! On his last day in Eos, he had knelt, his father's hand heavy in his hair, too naive, too foolish to see that his father's sickness was a killing. The smell of tallow and incense had mingled thickly with the sound of his father's labored breathing. His father's words had been made of breath, nothing left of his deep-timbered voice. "Tell the physicians I will be well," his father had said. "I wish to see all my son will accomplish when he takes the throne." In his life, he had known only one parent. His father had been to him a set of ideals, a man he looked up to and strove to please, a standard against whom he measured himself. Since his father's death, he had not allowed himself to think or feel anything but determination that he would return, that he would see his home again, and restore himself to the throne. Now he felt as if he stood in front of his father, felt his father's hand in his hair, as he never would again. He had wanted his father to be proud of him, and had failed him in the end. A sound from the doorway. He looked up and saw Luron. Damon drew in an unsteady breath. Luron was closing the door behind him and entering. He must deal with this, too. He tried to gather himself. Luron said, "No, I'm not here to," he said. "I'm just here." That's the third sucker punch in a page of text. He was suddenly aware that the room had grown dark, that night had fallen, and no one had come to light candles. He must have been here for hours. Someone had kept the servants out. Someone had kept everyone out. His generals and his nobles and every person who had business with the king had been turned back. Luron, he realized, had guarded his solitude for him. And his people, fearing the fierce, strange foreign prince, had done as Luron ordered and stayed out. He was stupidly, profoundly grateful for that. He looked at Luron, meaning to tell him how much it meant, though as he was, it would take a moment before he could muster himself to speak. Before he could, he felt Luron's fingers on the back of his neck, a shock of touch that caught him in a tumult of confusion as it drew him forward simply. It was, from Luron, slightly awkward, sweet, rare, stiff with obvious inexperience. If he had been offered this as an adult, he couldn't remember it. He couldn't remember ever having needed it, except that maybe he had needed it since the bells had rung in Achielos, and never allowed himself to ask for it. Body leaned into body, and he closed his eyes. Time passed. He became aware of the slow, strong pulse, the slender body, the warmth in his arms. And that was nice in a different way. "Now you are taking advantage of my kind-hearted instincts," Luron said, a murmur into his ear. He drew back, but didn't move away completely, nor did Luron seem to expect it, the bedding shifting as Luron sat beside him, as if it was natural for them to be sitting with their shoulders almost touching one another. He let his lips form a half-smile. "You aren't going to offer me one of your gaudy Varetian handkerchiefs?" "You could use the clothing you're wearing. It's about the same size." "Your poor Varetian sensibilities. All those wrists and ankles. And arms and thighs and every other part." "My father's dead." The words had a finality to them. His father was buried in Achielos beneath the columned halls of the Silent, where the pain and confusion of his last days would never trouble him again. He looked up at Luron. "You thought he was a warmonger, an aggressive, war-hungry king who invaded your country on the flimsiest of pretexts, hungry for land and the glory of Achielos." "No," said Luron. "We don't have to do this now." "A barbarian," said Damon, "with barbaric ambitions, fit only to rule by the sword. You hated him." "I hated you," said Luron. "I hated you so badly I thought I'd choke on it. If my uncle hadn't stopped me, I would have killed you. And then you saved my life, and every time I needed you, you were there. And I hated you for that, too." "I killed your brother." The silence seemed to tighten painfully. He made himself look at Luron, a bright, sharp presence beside him. "What are you doing here?" Damon said. He was pale in the moonlight, set against the dim shadows of the room that shrouded them both. Luron said, "I know what it's like to lose family." The room was very quiet, with no hint of the activity that must be taking place beyond its walls, even this late. A fort was never silent. There were always soldiers, attendants, slaves. Outside, the guards were making their evening rounds. The sentries on the walls were patrolling, looking out into the night. "Is there no way forward for us?" said Damon. It just came out. Beside him, he could feel Luron holding himself very still. "You mean, will I come back to your bed for the little time we have left?" "I mean that we hold the center. We hold everything from Aquitar to Sicyon. Can we not call it a kingdom and rule it together? Am I such a poor prospect than a patron princess or a daughter of the Empire?" He made himself say no more than that, though the words crowded in his chest. He waited. It surprised him that it hurt to wait, and that the longer he waited, the more he felt he couldn't bear to hear the answer brought to him on a knife point. When he made himself look at Luron, Luron's eyes on him were very dark, his voice quiet. "How can you trust me after what your own brother did to you?" "Because he was false," said Damon. "And you were true. I have never known a truer man," he said into the stillness. "I think if I gave you my heart, you would treat it tenderly." It's on page 200, if anyone's curious. Luron turned his head, denying Damon his face. Damon could see his breathing. After a moment, he said in a low voice, "When you make love to me like that, I can't think." "Don't think," said Damon. Damon saw the flickering change, the tension, as the words provoked an internal battle. Damon said, "Don't think." "Don't," said Luron. "Toy with me. I've not the means to defend against this." "I don't toy with you. I don't think," said Damon. "Kiss me," said Luron, and then flushed a rich color. "Don't think," Damon had said, but Luron couldn't do that. Even to sit there after what he had said, he was fighting a battle in his head. The words hung awkwardly, a blurt, but Luron didn't take them back. He just waited, his body singing with tension. Instead of leaning in, Damon took Luron's hand, brought it towards himself, and kissed his palm once. He had learned in the course of their one night together to tell when Luron was taken unawares, taken aback. It wasn't easy to anticipate, the gaps in Luron's experience not mapping to anything that he understood. He felt it now, Luron's eyes very dark, uncertain of what he should do. "I meant, don't let you think?" Luron didn't answer. Damon waited in the quiet. "I'm not," said Luron. And then, as the moment stretched out between them, "I'm not an innocent who needs his hand held through every step." "Aren't you?" Realization came to Damon. Luron's wariness was not, at this moment, the high walls of the defended citadel. It was that of a man with a portion of his guard down, who was desperately unused to it. After a moment, "At Ravenel, it had been a long time since I had with anyone. I was nervous." "I know," said Damon. "There has," said Luron. He stopped. "There has only been one other person." Softly, "I'm a little more experienced than that." "Yes, that is immediately apparent." "Is it?" A little pleased. "Yes." He looked at Luron, who was sitting right on the edge of the bed, his face still turned away slightly. Here there were only the dimly lit shapes of the room's arches, its furnishings, the unyielding marble base of the bed where they sat, mattressed and cushioned from its foot to the curve of its headrest. He spoke softly. "Luron, I'd never hurt you." He heard Luron's strange, disbelieving breath, and he realized what he had said. "I know," said Damon, "that I did hurt you." Luron's motionlessness was careful. Even his breathing was careful. He didn't turn back to look at Damon. "I hurt you, Luron." "That's enough. Stop," said Luron. "It wasn't right. You were just a boy. You didn't deserve what happened to you." I said that's enough. Is it so hard to hear? He thought of Auguste. Thought how no boy deserved to lose his brother. I'm just rip my skin off, set me on fire. It would be less painful. The room was very quiet. Luron didn't look back at him. Deliberately, Damon leaned back, his body intentionally relaxed, his weight on his hands on the bed. He didn't understand the forces that moved in Luron, but some instinct pushed him to say it. My first time, there was a lot of rolling around. I was eager and had no idea what to do. It's not like Vare. We don't watch people doing it in public, he said. I still get too caught up near the end. I know I forget myself. A silence. It went on too long. He didn't disturb it, watching the tense line of Luron's body. When you kissed me, said Luron, pushing the words out, I liked it. When you took me in your mouth, it was the first time that I had done that, he said. I liked it when you... Luron's breathing shallowed as Damon pushed himself up. He had kissed Luron as a slave, but never as himself. They both felt the difference of it, the anticipated kiss so real between them it was as if it was already happening. The inches of air between them were nothing and everything. Luron's reaction to kissing had always been complex, tense, vulnerable, hot. The tension was the greatest part of it, as though this single act was too much for him, too extreme. And yet he had asked for it. Kiss me. Damon lifted his hand, slid his fingers into the short, soft hair at the back of Luron's neck, cupping his head. They had never been this close, not with the fact of who he was open between them. He felt the tension in Luron rise, the crisis peaking with proximity. I'm not your slave, said Damon. I'm a man. Don't think, he'd said, because it was easier than saying, take me for who I am. He couldn't bear that suddenly. He wanted it without pretenses, without excuses, his fingers curling hard into Luron's hair. It's me, said Damon. It's me, here with you. Say my name. Damianos. He felt the sundering in Luron at that, the name an admission, a statement of truth that came out of him. Luron opened to him with nothing to hide behind. He could hear it in Luron's voice. Prince Killer. Luron shuddered against him as they kissed, as if, having surrendered to it, the painful exchange of brother for lover, he was in some private reality where myth and man met. Even if it was some self-destructive impulse in Luron, Damon was not noble enough to give it up. He wanted it, felt a surge of purely selfish desire as he thought of it, that Luron knew it was him, that Luron wanted this with him. He pushed Luron down onto the bed, pushed himself on top. Luron's fingers tight in his hair, though fully clothed, they could do no more than kiss. It was a closeness that wasn't enough, limbs tangling. His hand slid impotently down Luron's tight-laced clothing. Beneath him, Luron's kisses were all open-mouthed. Desire flamed, painful and bright. It was subsumed, as it had to be, into the act of kissing. His body felt heavy, one form of penetration substituted for another. The tremors in Luron, not that of a single barrier crumbling, but shudders as though one after another were being brought down, each place unexplored, each place deeper than the last. Prince Killer. A slide and a push, and Luron was on top of him, looking down. Luron's breathing was quickened, his pupils enlarged in the dim light. For a moment, they just gazed at each other. That counts. Everybody drink. We're holding hands, I presume. Because of course we are. Luron's gaze splayed out over him, a knee on either side of Damon's thighs. It was a single dark-eyed moment of choice, the chance to leave or stop. Instead, Luron took hold of the gold lion pin at Damon's shoulder, and with a sharp tug, he cast it off. It skittered over the marble floor to the far right of the bed. Cloth unwound itself, slipped from its moorings. Damon's clothing fell away from him, revealing his body to Luron's gaze. Damon pushed himself up instinctively onto one arm and was stopped halfway by the look in Luron's eyes. He felt acutely aware that he was half on his back, naked, with Luron fully clothed, astride, still wearing his polished boots and the high-necked, tightly laced collar of his jacket. It was a sudden, vulnerable fantasy that Luron might simply get up and wander off, strolling the rooms or sit in the chair opposite to sip wine with his legs crossed, while Damon was left exposed on the bed. Luron didn't do that. Luron lifted his hands to his own neck. His eyes on Damon's, slowly, he took up one of the tight-laced ties at his throat and drew on it. The spill of heat that came from that was too much, the reality of who they both were stark between them. This was the man who had had him whipped, the Prince of Vare, his nation's enemy. Damon could see Luron's shallow breath. He could see his dark-eyed intention. Luron was undressing for him, one lace after another, the jacket's fabric opening, revealing the fine white shirt beneath. Heat flared over Damon's skin. Luron's jacket came first, dropping from him like armor. He looked younger in only a shirt. Damon saw the hint of the scar at Luron's shoulder, the knife wound, newly healed. Luron's chest was rising and falling. A pulse was hammering in his throat. Luron reached behind himself and drew the shirt off. The sight of Luron's skin sent its shock down into him. He wanted to touch it, to slide his hands over it, but he felt pinned, controlled by the intensity of what was happening. Luron's body was held in obvious tension, from his hard pink nipples to the taut muscles of his stomach, and for a moment they just looked, caught in each other's eyes. More than skin was exposed. Luron said, "I know who you are. I know who you are. Damianos." "Luron," said Damon, and sat up then. He couldn't help it, his hands riding up the fabric over Luron's thighs to clasp his unclothed waist. Skin touched skin. His whole body felt like it was shaking. Luron slid a little, straddling Damon's lap, his thighs opening. He put his hand on the plane of Damon's chest, on the mark where Auguste had run him through, and the touch made Damon ache. In the dim light, Auguste was between them, sharp as a knife. The scar on his shoulder was the last thing Auguste had done before Damon had killed him. The kiss was like a wound. As if to do it, Luron was impaling himself on that knife. There was an edge of desperation to it, Luron kissing like he needed it, his fingers clutching, his body unsteady. Damon groaned, wanting it selfishly, his thumbs pressing hard into Luron's flesh. He kissed back knowing it hurt him, hurt them both. There was the desperation in both of them, an aching need that could not be filled, and he could feel it in Luron, the same unconscious striving. He had envisaged slow lovemaking, but it was as if, having reached the edge, they could only hurtle. The slight shudders of Luron's breath, the urgent kisses that strove for closeness. Luron's boots pulled off, the thin silk of his courtier's clothes peeled down. Do it. Luron was turning in his arms, presenting himself as he had on their first night together, offering his body from the curve in his back to the dip of his lowered head. Do it. I want it. I want... Damon was unable to stop himself, pressing his own weight forward, running his hand up Luron's back, and slowly rubbing himself close to his object, in sweet, simulated fuck. Luron arched his back, and Damon's body ran out of breath. We can't. We don't have... I don't care, Luron said. Luron shuddered, and his body gave a jerk that was an unmistakable fuck backwards. For a moment, both their bodies were operating somewhat on instinct, pushing together. It wasn't going to work. Physicality was an obstacle to desire, and he groaned into Luron's neck, slid his hands down over Luron's body. In a burst of explicit fantasy, he wished Luron were a pet or a slave, wished him a body that was not going to require extensive, coaxing preparation before it could be penetrated. He felt like he was right on the edge of control, felt like he had been that way for days, months. He wanted to be inside. He wanted to feel Luron surrender, shudder, and give way, become total. He wanted no denying that Luron had let him in, who he had let in. It's me. His body primed, as though only in one act could this be driven home. He slid his hands up Luron's thighs, pushing them apart a little. The view was pinked, small and tight, the curl of a calyx impenetrable. Do it, I told you, I don't care. A smash. The unlit oil burner hitting the marble and shattering in the dim room, his fingers clumsy. He pressed with his oiled fingers first. It was inelegant, braced over Luron's back, guiding himself in with one hand. It wouldn't, quite. Let me in, he said, and Luron made a new sound. His head dropped between his shoulder blades, his breath ribboning out of him. Let me inside you. There was some give, and he pushed, slowly. He felt every inch as the room faded into sensation. There was only the feel of it, the slide of his chest against Luron's back, the dip of Luron's head, and the sweat-damp hair at the nape of Luron's neck. Damon was panting. He was aware of his own insistent weight, and Luron beneath him pushed forward onto his elbows. Damon dropped his forehead to Luron's neck and just felt it. He was inside Luron. It felt raw and unprotected. He had never felt more like himself. Luron had let him inside, knowing who he was. His body was already moving. Luron made a helpless sound into the bedding that was the Varetian word, yes. Damon's grip tightened in helpless reflex, his forehead bent to Luron's neck as the heat of that admission pulsed through him. He wanted Luron fully against him. He wanted to feel every cooperative muscle, every encouraging movement, so that every time he looked at Luron he would remember that he had been like this. His arms slid around Luron's chest, thigh fit against thigh. Damon's grip, still oiled, was wrapped around the hottest, most honest part of Luron. Luron's body responded, moving, finding its own pleasure. They were moving together. It was good. It was so good, and he wanted more of it, wanted to drive it towards its conclusion, wanted it never to end. He was only half aware that he was speaking words unchecked and in his own language. I want you, said Damon. I've wanted you for so long. I've never felt like this with anyone. Damon, said Luron helplessly. Damon. His body pulsed, almost climaxing. He barely knew the moment when he pressed Luron onto his back, the brief sundering, the need to be back inside him, Luron's mouth opening under his, the tug on his neck as Luron took hold of it and pulled him in. His weight bore down on Luron, shuddering heat as he entered him again with a strong, slow push. And Luron opened for it, a single, perfect slide. Damon took up the rhythm that he needed, their bodies tangled in a harder, continuous fucking. They were caught on each other, and when their eyes met, Luron said, Damon, again, like it meant everything. And as if Damon's identity was enough, he was shuddering, pulsing against the air. Strident as proof, Luron came with Damon inside him, Damon's name on his lips, and Damon was lost to it, his whole body given over, The first deep pulse of his own climax, just one part of a choking pleasure that took him, overwhelming and bright, into oblivion. That's the end of the chapter. The chat is full of quotes as the scene went on. And Maddie just saying the way everyone's just quoting the book because what? Yeah. Yes. You know, at some point, all you can do is just regurgitate the words that are being thrown at you. I've got to stop drinking and looking at chat at the same time. Henry, that was a call out to you specifically. Whew. You know what's funny is that I had wanted to say that I remembered there being another love scene, but I couldn't quite remember if that was just my wishful thinking or if there had actually been a second one in the third book. So I was sort of expecting this, but kind of maybe not. And then I was given something that I feel embarrassed to have even partially forgotten about. So that's the weird place that I'm currently sitting in. Whew. All right, well, we're a little bit late for the break. So I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. I'm going to correct the raccoon that I'm sure is going on up here. And then we'll be back to get through where the hell are we? We're on page 211 for chapter 13. Let's all take a second in the Gaywatch break room to come back to Earth a little bit. And when we come back, we'll get into the second half of this reading stream. All right? Yeah, back in a minute, okay? Okay. And we're back. We're returned. We're returned as I try to get everything clicked back into place. Hello. Oh, okay. I love all the new readers in the chat. I love all their realization at like just how valid it is that M basically has this entire trilogy memorized. We're all realizing exactly why, like to the depths of why. And I love watching that happen. Be like, do you see now why someone might have this memorized into their soul? We are coming to understand. Which, if I had the memory banks to do it, I would. So, like, respect it. Respect that this is something that you've got in your back pocket. Oh, also, welcome to, say hello to Arthur. I just switched him out. I don't know why. I was feeling chaotic. So, Arthur's here for the second half. As we pick up with the morning after. I don't know where this next chapter picks up. We're on page 210 for chapter 13. Oh, okay. Let me get my face out of here. Damon woke to the impression of Luron beside him, a warm, wonderful presence in his bed. Gladness welled, and he let himself look, a sleepy indulgence. Luron lay with the sheet tangled around his waist, the morning sun dusting him with gold. Fuck you. C.S. Scott. Fuck you. Damon had half thought to find him gone, as he had once before, vanished like the tendrils of a dream. The intimacy of last night might have been too much for either or both of them. He lifted his hand to brush Luron's cheek, smiling. He was opening his eyes. Damon, said Luron. Damon's heart moved in his chest, because the way Luron said his name was quiet, happy, a little shy. Luron had only ever said it once before, last night. Luron, said Damon. They were gazing at each other. To Damon's delight, Luron reached out to trace a touch down over his body. Luron was looking at him as if he couldn't quite believe the fact of him, as if even touch could not quite confirm it. What? Damon was smiling. You're very, said Luron, and then, flushing, attractive. Really? Said Damon, in a rich, warm voice. Yes, said Luron. You know, sometimes Luron is just a 20-year-old young man who is absolutely fucking in love. Sometimes he just gets to be a 20-year-old, and we're breathing, we're inhaling, we're exhaling. Damon's smile widened, and he lay back in the sheets and just luxuriated in the idea, feeling ridiculously pleased. Well, Damon owned, turning his head back to Luron eventually. You are too. Luron dropped his head slightly, on the edge of laughter. He said with absurd fondness, Most people tell me that right away. Was it the first time that he had said it? Damon looked at Luron, who was now lying half on his side, his blonde hair a little mussed, eyes full of teasing light. Sweet and simple in the morning, Luron's beauty was heart-stopping. I would have, said Damon, if I'd had the chance to court you properly. If I'd come in, state to your father. If there had been a chance for our countries to be friends. Which he does not say. He felt the mood shift, thinking of the past. Luron didn't seem to notice it. Thank you. I know exactly how it would have been. You and Auguste would have been slapping each other on the back and watching tournaments. And I would have been trailing around, tugging on your sleeve, trying to get a look in edgewise. I feel like if I start screaming now, I'm just not going to stop, and that would make this a very screamy live stream. So Damon held himself very still. This easy way of speaking of Auguste was new, and he didn't want to disturb it. After a moment, Luron said, He would have liked you. Even after I started courting his little brother, said Damon carefully. He watched Luron stop, the way that he did when he was taken by surprise, and then lift his eyes to meet Damon's. Yes, said Luron softly. His cheeks reddened slightly. The kiss happened because they couldn't help it, and it was so sweet and so right that Damon felt a kind of ache. He pulled back. The realities of the outside world seemed to press at him. He couldn't say it. No, listen to me. He felt Luron's hand firm on the back of his neck. I'm not going to let my uncle hurt you. Luron's blue gaze was calm and steady, as if he had made a decision and wanted Damon to know it. It's what I came here last night to say. I'm going to take care of it. Promise me, Damon heard himself say. Promise me we won't let him. I promise. Luron said it seriously, his voice honest. No game playing, just the truth. Damon nodded, his grip on Luron tightening. The kissing this time had an echo of last night's desperation, a need to block out the outside world and stay for a moment longer in this cocoon, Luron's arms winding around his neck. Damon rolled over him, body fitting against body. The sheet slipped away from them. Slow rocking began to turn kissing into something else. There was a knock at the door. Come in, said Luron, turning his head towards the sound. Damon said, Luron, shocked and on full display as the door swung open. Pallas entered. Luron greeted him with no self-consciousness at all. Yes, Luron's voice was matter-of-fact. Pallas's mouth opened. Damon saw what Pallas saw. Luron like some dream of a newly fucked virgin, himself unmistakably above him, fully aroused. He flushed all over. In Eos, he might have dallied with a lover while a household slave attended to some task in the room, but only because the slave was so far beneath him in status as not to signify. The idea of a soldier watching him make love to Luron was breaking open his mind. Luron had never even taken an acknowledged lover before, let alone... Pallas forced his eyes to the floor. My apologies, Exalted. I came to seek your orders for the morning. We're busy currently. Have a servant prepare the baths and bring us food at mid-morning. Luron spoke like an administrator glancing up from his desk. Yes, Exalted. Pallas turned blindly and made for the door. What is it? Luron looked at Damon, who had detached himself and was sitting with the sheet pulled up to where he had clutched it to cover himself, and then, with the burgeoning delight of discovery, Are you shy? In Achielos we don't, said Damon, in front of other people. Not even the king? Especially not the king, said Damon, for whom the king still partly meant his father. But how does the court know if the royal marriage has been consummated? The king knows whether or not it has been consummated. Horrified. Luron stared at him. Damon was surprised when Luron dropped his head, and even more surprised when Luron's shoulders started shaking. Around the laughter emerged, "You wrestled him without any clothes on." "That is sports," said Damon. No, stop! Why does that... How is that just as iconic in a completely different way as that one line from Effie Trinket in the Hunger Games where she's like, "That is mahogany." Oh, that is sports. Oh, beautiful. Oh. He folded his arms, thinking that Varetians lacked any sense of dignity, even as Luron, sitting up and pressing a delighted kiss to his lips, had him slightly mollified. Later, the King of Vare really consummates his marriage in front of the court. "Not in front of the court," said Luron, as if this were unspeakably foolish. "In front of the council." "Guyon is on the council," said Damon. Later, they lay alongside one another, and Damon found himself tracing the scar on Luron's shoulder, the only place his skin was marred, as Damon now knew intimately. "I'm sorry Gaywatch is dead. I know you were trying to keep him alive. I thought he knew something that I could use against my uncle. It doesn't matter. We'll stop him another way. You never told me what happened." "It was nothing. There was a knife fight. I got free, and Guyon and I came to an arrangement." Damon gazed at him. "What?" "Nicandros is never going to believe it," said Damon. "I don't see why not." "You were taken prisoner. You single-handedly escaped from the cells at Fortaine and somehow managed to get Guyon to switch sides on the way out?" "Well," said Luron, "not everyone is as bad at escaping as you are." Damon let out a breath and found himself laughing, as he might never have thought possible, considering what awaited him outside. He remembered Luron in the mountains fighting alongside him, shoring up his injured side. "When you lost your brother, was there someone to comfort you?" "Yes," said Luron. "In a way." "Then I'm glad," said Damon. "I'm glad you weren't alone." Luron pushed himself away, up into a sitting position, and for a moment he sat without speaking. He pushed his palms into his eye sockets. "What is it?" "It's nothing," said Luron. Damon, sitting up alongside him, felt the outside world intrude its presence again. "We should, and we will." Luron turned to him, sliding fingers into his hair. "But first, we have the morning." That's a scene break. She can't just let us have nice things, can she? After, they talked. Servants brought a breakfast of fruits, soft cheese, honey, and breads on round platters, and they sat at the table in one of the rooms that opened onto the bedchamber. Damon took the seat closest to the wall, affixing the gold pin he had recovered to the cotton at his shoulder. Luron sat in a relaxed pose, in only pants and a loose shirt, its collar and sleeves still open. Luron was talking. Quietly, seriously, Luron outlined the state of play as he saw it, describing his plans and his contingencies. Damon realized that Luron was letting him into a part of himself he had never shared before, and he found himself drawn into the political complexities, even as the experience felt new and a little revelatory. Luron never opened his thoughts like this, but always kept his planning intensely private, making his decisions alone. When servants entered to clear the plates from the table, Luron watched them come and go and then looked at Damon. There was an unspoken question in his words. "You're not keeping slaves in your household." "I can't imagine why," said Damon. "If you've forgotten what to do with a slave, I can tell you," said Luron. "You hate the idea of slavery. It turns your stomach." Damon said it, a flat statement of truth. "If I'd been anyone else, you would have freed me on the first night." He searched Luron's face. When I argued the case for slavery in Arles, you didn't try to change my mind. It is not a subject for an exchange of ideas. There is nothing to say. There will be slaves in Achielos. We are a slave culture. I know that. Damon said, Are pets and their contracts so different? Did Nicaise have a choice? He had the choice of the poor with no other way to survive, the choice of a child powerless to his elders, the choice of a man when his king gives him an order, which is no choice at all, and yet still more than is afforded to a slave. Damn, Luron! Damon felt again the shock of hearing Luron voice his private beliefs. He thought of him, helping Erasmus. He thought of him visiting the girl from the village, teaching her a sleight of hand trick. For the first time, he caught a glimmer of what Luron would be like as a king. He saw him not as the regent's unready nephew, not as Auguste's younger brother, but as himself, a young man with a collection of talents thrown into leadership too early, and taking it on, because he was given no other choice. I would serve him, he thought, and that itself was like a little revelation. I know what you think of my uncle, but he is not... Luron spoke after a pause. Not... He won't hurt the child, said Luron. Whether it is your son or Castor's, it is leverage. It is leverage against you, against your armies, and against your men. You mean that it hurts me more that my son is alive and whole than it would if he were maimed or dead? Yes, said Luron. He said it seriously, looking into Damon's eyes. Damon felt every muscle in his body ache with the effort of not thinking of it, of not thinking the other, darker thought, the one that at all costs must be avoided. He tried to think instead of a way forward, though it was impossible. He had an entire army gathered, Varetians and Achaeans alike, ready to march south. He had spent months with Luron assembling their forces, establishing a base of power, setting up supply lines, winning soldiers to their cause. In one stroke, the regent had rendered his army useless, unable to move, unable to fight, because if they did... My uncle knows you won't move against him while he holds the child, said Luron. And then, calmly, steadily, so we get him back. That's a scene break. He looked for changes in her, but the cool, untouchable air was the same, as was the particular way that her eyes regarded him. She had the same coloring as Luron. She had the same mathematical mind. They were like a matched pair, except that her presence was different. There was a part of Luron that was always in tension, even when he affected calm. Jacost's unassailable composure seemed like serenity, until you knew she was dangerous. A similar core of steel, perhaps, existed in both. She was waiting for him in her solar, where he'd allowed her to be reinstated under heavy guard. She sat elegantly, with her ladies arranged around her like flowers in a garden. She didn't seem perturbed by her incarceration, or even really to notice it. After his long, scrolling look around the room, he sat himself in the chair opposite her, and as if the soldiers who had entered behind him didn't exist, he said, Is there a child? I have told you that there is, said Jacost. I wasn't talking to you, said Damon. The attending women seated around Jacost were of varying ages, from the eldest of perhaps 60 to the youngest, Jacost's age, around 24. He guessed that all 7 had been in her household a long time. The woman with the braided black hair was someone he vaguely recognized. Kyrina? The 2 slaves were also faintly familiar. He didn't recognize the older maidservant or the remaining ladies of good birth. He let his eyes pass over them slowly. All were silent. He returned his gaze to Jacost. Let me tell you what is going to happen. You are going to be executed. You are going to be executed whatever you say or do. But I will spare your women, if they agree to answer my questions. Silence. Not one of the women spoke or came forward. He said to the soldiers behind him, Take them. Jacost said, This plan of action will mean the death of the child. He said, We haven't established that there is a child. He learns. He learns. He learns. He learns. She smiled, as if pleased to discover a pet capable of a trick. You've never been very good at games. I don't think you have what it takes to play against me. He said, I've changed. The soldiers had halted, but there was a ripple among the ladies now at their presence, as Damon sat back in his chair. She said, Castor will kill it. I will tell Castor that the child is yours, and he'll kill it. Sophisticated thoughts about using it as leverage won't enter his mind. He said, I believe Castor will kill any child he believes is mine, but you have no means of getting a message to Castor. The child's wet nurse. Wet nurse, said Jacost. Will tell Castor the truth if I am killed. If you are killed. That's right. You, said Damon, but not your women. There was a pause. You are the only one protected in your arrangement. These women are going to die, unless they talk to me. She said, You have changed. Or is this the new power behind the throne? Who am I really negotiating with here, I wonder? He was already nodding to the nearest soldier. Start with her. It wasn't pleasant. The women resisted and there was screaming. He watched impassively as soldiers took hold of the women and began to drag them from the room. Kyrina, we'll go with Kyrina. Kyrina wrenched herself bodily out of the grip of two soldiers and prostrated herself, forehead to the floor. Exalted. No, said Jacost. Exalted. You are merciful. I have a son of my own. Spare my life, Exalted. No, said Jacost. He will not kill a room full of women for loyalty to their mistress, Kyrina. Spare my life, I swear. I will tell you all I know. No, said Jacost. Tell me, said Damon. Kyrina spoke without lifting her head from her prostration. Her long hair, which had escaped from its bindings during the tussle, spread over the floor. There is a child. He was taken to Eos. That's enough, said Jacost. None of us know if the child is yours. She says it is. That's enough, Kyrina, said Jacost. There's more, said Damon. Exalted, said Kyrina, as Jacost said no. My lady did not trust the region of Ver to protect her interests. In the case that there was no other way to save her life, the wet nurse could be instructed to bring the child to you in exchange for Jacost's freedom. Damon sat back in his chair and lifted his brows slightly at Jacost. I'm having a moment. Can't imagine why. Jacost's hand was a fist in her skirts, but she spoke in a calm voice. Do you think you have overturned my plans? There is no way to circumvent my conditions. The wet nurse will not leave Eos. If you are going to make the exchange, you will need to take me there and exchange me personally. Damon looked at Kyrina, who lifted her head and nodded. Jacost, he thought, believed that it was impossible for him to travel into Eos, and that there was no place where it was safe for him to attempt an exchange. But there was a place where two enemies could meet without fear of ambush, an ancient ceremonial place which held to strict laws, where, since days of old, the Kai Roi could gather in safety, protected by the standing rule of peace, and the order of soldiers who enforced it. Kings traveled there to be crowned, nobles to settle disputes. Its strictures were sacred, and allowed parley without the prickling spears and spilt blood of the earliest warlike days of Achielos. It had a faded quality that appealed to him. We make the exchange in a place where no man can bring an army or draw a sword on pain of death, Damon said. We make the exchange in the King's Meet. There was not much to do after that. Kyrina was taken to an antechamber to arrange communication with the wet nurse. The women were escorted out, and then he and Jacost were alone. Give my congratulations to the Prince of Vare, she said, but you're a fool to trust him. He has his own plans. He has never pretended otherwise, said Damon. He looked at her, alone on the low couch. He couldn't help but remember the day they met. She had been presented to his father, daughter of a minor noble from this city name. Agena? Agena feels closest. We'll go with that. And he had been able to look nowhere else. It was 3 months of courtship before she was in his arms. He said, "You chose a man who was bent on destroying his own country. You chose my brother, and look where it's left you. You have no position, no friends. Even your own women have turned on you. Don't you think it's a shame things had to end this way between us?" "Yes," she said. "Castor should have killed you." The end of the chapter. We're on page 224. For chapter 14, we still have about 15 minutes left in the stream. And, as I've said before, this is a book with plenty of scene breaks. So we're going to keep going to kind of find a good ending point for today. Because he couldn't put Jacost in a sack and carry her bodily across the border into Castor's territory, the journey presented certain logistical challenges. In order to justify 2 wagons and an entourage, they would be pretending to be cloth merchants. This disguise was not going to stand up to any serious scrutiny. There would be bolts of cloth in the wagons. There would also be Jacost. Stepping out into the courtyard, she looked at the preparations with the sort of calm that said she would cooperate wholly with Damon's plans and then, given the first opportunity, smile and wreck them. The real problem was not even the disguise. It was getting past the border patrols. Cloth merchants might help them travel unimpeded inside Achielos, but it would not get them past border sentries. It would certainly not get them past border sentries who, Damon was quite sure, had already been alerted to the possibility of their coming by Jacost. Damon spent 2 fruitless hours with Nicandros trying to plot a course that could sneak 2 wagons across the border without alerting patrols, and another fruitless hour alone staring at the map, until Luron wandered in and outlined a plan so outrageous that Damon had said yes with the feeling that his mind was splitting apart. They were taking the best of their soldiers, those elite few who had excelled in the games. Jord, who had won short sword, Lydos of the trident, Octus the spear thrower, the young triple-crowned Pallas, Lazar, who had whistled at him, and a handful of their best spear throwers and swordsmen. Luron's addition to the expedition was Pascal, and Damon tried not to think too deeply about the reasons why Luron thought it necessary to bring a physician. And then, ludicrously, Guion. Guion could use a sword. Guion's guilt made him more likely to fight for Damon than anyone else, and if the worst happened, Guion's testimony had the potential to bring down the Regency. Luron had said all of this succinctly, and told Guion in a pleasant voice, "Your wife can chaperone Jacost on the journey." Guion had understood more quickly than Damon. "I see. My wife is the leverage for my good behavior." "That's right," said Luron. Damon watched from a second-story window as they gathered in the courtyard. 2 wagons, 2 noblewomen, and 12 soldiers, of whom 10 were soldiers and 2 were Guion and Pascal in metal hats. He himself was dressed in the humble white cloth of a traveler, with a wrist gauntlet of leather strapped over the gold cuff. He was waiting for Luron to arrive in order to discuss the finer points of his ridiculous plan. Damon picked up a glazed pitcher of wine in order to pour it onto one of the waiting shallow cups. "Did you learn the rotation of the border patrols?" said Luron. "Yes, our scouts found..." Luron was standing in the doorway wearing a kitten of unadorned white cotton. Damon dropped the pitcher. Boys. It shattered, shards flying outward as it slipped from his fingers and hit the stone floor. Luron's arms were bare. His throat was bare. His collarbone was bare, and most of his thighs, his long legs, and all of his left shoulder. Damon stared at him. "You're wearing Achiellan clothing," said Damon. "Everyone's wearing Achiellan clothing," said Luron. "Who manifested this? I saw this in the chat. Somebody manifested Luron and Achiellan clothing, and I need to know who the hell it was. It wasn't you! Henry! Henry? 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 I can't talk to you, Henry. I can't speak to you. I can't do it. I simply can't. I just simply can't. I didn't even remember this. When I saw you say it, I was like, I don't think that ever happens. But it's you! So I should have realized. Jesus Christ, Henry. Where even Henry just knocked me off my game. God damn. Also, can we talk about the general symbolism of, the guy who was entirely laced up the whole time? Now, after certain key moments have happened, he is now in looser, more revealing compared to his previous outfits clothing. She does this. She thinks of this. I'm infuriated by everyone up to and including Henry. Damon thought that the pitcher had shattered and he could not now take a deep draught of the wine. Luron came forward, navigating the broken ceramic in his short cotton and sandaled feet until he reached the seat beside Damon where the map was laid out on the wooden table. "Once we know the rotation of the patrols, we'll know when to approach," said Luron. Luron sat down. "We need to approach at the beginning of their rotation in order to give us the most time before they report back to the fort." It was even shorter sitting down. Damon. "Yes, sorry," said Damon. And then, "What were you saying?" "The patrols," said Luron. No. It's the range. She has the range, okay? She can make you cry over childhood trauma and abuse. She can make you absolutely implode in on yourself within angsty, emotional-filled sex scenes. Not once, but twice. And then she can have this rom-com ass bullshit in the same book. The plan was no less outrageous when laid out in meticulous detail, with estimates of travel times and distances. The risk, if it failed, was enormous. They were taking as many soldiers as they could justify, but if they were discovered, if it came to a fight, they would lose. They had only 12 soldiers. 12-ish, amended Damon, thinking of Pascal and Guillaume. In the courtyard, he looked at the small assembled party. The armies that they had spent so long building would be left behind. Van and Macedon would stay to jointly defend the network they had established, from Ravenel through Fortaine, Marlis, and Sicyon. Van could handle Macedon, Luron said. He ought to have known that an army was never going to have been the way to fight the regent. It was always going to be like this, a small group, alone and vulnerable, making their way across the countryside. Nicandros greeted him in the courtyard, the wagons prepared, their small band ready to ride out. The soldiers only needed to know their own roles in the enterprise, and Damon's briefing to them was short. But Nicandros was his friend, and he deserved to know how they would get across the border. So he told him Luron's plan. That's a scene break. Have I scooted all the way back in my utter astonishment in Henry's capabilities? It's dishonorable, said Nicandros. They were approaching the border sentry on the southern road that crossed from Sicyon into the province of Melos. Damon scanned the blockade and the patrol, which was 40 men. Beyond the blockade was the sentry tower, which would also be manned and which would relay any message across the network of towers to the main fort. He could see the armed readiness of the men. The approach of their wagons, trundling slowly across the countryside, had long since been observed from the tower. I wish to restate my strong objection, said Nicandros. It's noted, said Damon. Damon was suddenly aware of the flimsiness of his disguise, the incongruity of the wagon, the awkward mien of his own soldiers, who had to be schooled multiple times not to call him exalted, and the threat of Jacost herself, waiting cool-eyed inside the wagon. The danger was real. If Jacost found her way out of her bindings and gagged to make a sound, or was discovered inside the wagons, they faced capture and death. The sentry tower held at least 50 men, in addition to the 40 here in the patrol guarding the road. There was no way to fight past them. Damon made himself sit at the reins of the wagon and continued to drive it slowly, not giving in to the temptation to speed up, but approaching the blockade at a sedate walk. Halt, said the guard. Damon reined in. Nicandros reined in. The 12 soldiers reined in. The wagon stopped, with a creak and a long drawn-out woe to the horses from Damon. The captain came forward, a helmeted man on a bay horse, a short red cape flowing over his right shoulder. Declare yourself. We are the escort to the Lady Jacost, returning to Eos after her labor, said Damon. There was nothing to confirm or deny this statement other than a blank, covered wagon that seemed to wink in the sun. He could feel Nicandros' disapproval behind him. The captain said, Our reports say that the Lady Jacost was taken prisoner at Carthus. Your reports are wrong. The Lady Jacost is in that wagon. There was a pause. In that wagon. That's right. Another pause. Damon, who was telling the truth, looked back at the captain with the steady gaze he had learned from Luron. It didn't work. I'm sure the Lady Jacost won't mind answering a few questions. I'm sure she will mind, said Damon. She requested, quite clearly, not to be disturbed. We have orders to search every wagon that comes through. The lady will have to make allowances. There was a new tone in the captain's voice. There had been too many objections. To stall again wasn't safe. Even so, Damon heard himself saying, You can't just barge in on, Open the wagon, said the captain, ignoring him. The first attempt was less like the throwing open of illicit cargo and more like the awkward knocking on my lady's door. There was no answer. A second knock. No answer. A third. You see? She's sleeping. Are you really going to... The captain called. Open it up. There was a splintering sound of impact, as of a wooden bolt struck by a mallet. Damon forced himself to do nothing. Nicandros' hand went to the hilt of his sword, his expression tense, ready. The wagon door swung open. There was an interval of silence, broken by the occasional muffled sounds of an exchange. It went on for some time. My apologies, sir, the captain returned, bowing deeply. The Lady Jacost is, of course, welcome wherever she chooses to go. He was red-faced and sweating slightly. At the lady's request, I will ride with you personally through the last of the checkpoints to ensure that you are not stopped again. Thank you, Captain, said Damon, with great dignity. Let them through, came the call. The stories of Lady Jacost's beauty are not exaggerated, said the captain, man to man, as they wound their way across the countryside. I expect you to speak of the Lady Jacost with the greatest respect, Captain, said Damon. Yes, of course, my apologies, said the captain. The captain ordered a full salute for them when they parted ways at the final checkpoint. They trundled on for 2 miles until the checkpoint was safely out of sight behind a hill. When the wagon stopped and the door swung open, Luron stepped out of the wagon, wearing only a loose Venetian shirt, slightly disheveled over his pants. Nicandros looked from him to the wagon and back again. He said, How did you convince Jacost to play along with the guards? I didn't, said Luron. He tossed the wad of blue silk in his hands to one of the soldiers to dispose of, then shrugged into his jacket in a rather mannish gesture. Nicandros was staring at him. Don't think about it too much, said Damon. Oh, it was Linaz. Is that how your handle is supposed to be pronounced, by the way? Because I've seen it a bunch. I know who you are. I just don't think I've ever said it out loud before. Is that how we pronounce your handle that you apparently called this one? Lakeisha. Don't picture my boyfriend in drag, bro. Oh my god, that's right. He picked up that dress and book too, Jamie. Also, hi, Jamie. Holy shit. Eve's internet froze at that moment because the internet simply can't handle Luron's Jacost. Oh my god. Okay, so it is coming up to almost exactly 5. This feels like a rather perfect moment to stop for today. So we're on page 233 in chapter 14. Actually, wait, hang on. Let me I did not say. I meant to say it when I came back from break, and then I didn't. I am giving away this copy, this edition of the trilogy of Captive Prince. If you would like to enter for a chance to win this trilogy, all 3 books, I should probably have all 3 books on standby to show you guys, but I don't in this moment, but I will at the next stream. If you would like to win this edition, like these exact books, the books that I've been reading on stream the whole time, you can win these. I do have to add the stipulation for only American and Canadian entries, please. International shipping has officially bitten me in the ass about these sorts of giveaways. So sorry, but I can currently only do America and Canada. So if you are in the United States or you are in Canada, please enter to win the books that I have read on stream. And we will draw those. I will figure out when exactly the last stream for, if not King's Rising, then when we finish Captive Prince, so finishing Summer Palace. I'll figure out exactly how many streams we have, so I'll let you guys know when we'll be doing the actual draw. But for the next couple of streams at least, comment on the actual stream, not in the chat, once on in the comment section down below. You just need to let me know that you want to be entered. You only got to enter once, no big deal. US and Canada, and we will be able to give away the big trilogy. This is the big giveaway. We've given away other like single volumes, and then now I actually get to give away the whole trilogy. So I'm kind of excited about that. But this is where we're ending for the weekend. I will see you back on Tuesday for more of this, as we're getting down to it, actually. And it's been a banger through and through. But the last section of this book, we still haven't gotten to some of my favorite shit. Still. So I'll see you guys on Tuesday. If you want to have a little book chat about what we read today, patrons and YouTube members get to join a live stream at 2:15 before reading streams to have a little bit of chat of what we read previously. So on Tuesday at 2:15, there will be a stream for those people to talk about what we read today. And now that all of my YouTuber stuff is done, I'm going to go collapse because I love this trilogy. Have a very lovely weekend. Please remember to take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for being here. And I will see you next week.